Now we have to write the Kotlin part of the application. The Kotlin part of the application is used to build the logic portion of the application. What the application will do when the button is clicked, which button that we have under the UI, that's the calculate button. So we have to write the code that this 20%, if 20% is selected, then use the 20% of the cost of service that is entered as the input and calculate the tip and display it at the bottom. So this is all we have to do under the Kotlin file. So let's start with the Kotlin programming. So by default, if you open the main activity.kt file, it will look like this. It has a package name defined at the top. Then it has two of the import files. One is app compatibility and other one is the OS bundle. OS bundle is both of them are necessary. One is for app compat activity class that we are extending under main activity. So app compat activity class has all the functions that we need for any application, like the Oncreate function or the onStart or onPause function. So what are these? So when an application is made, then all of these means the application goes through number of states. When you keep it under the recent apps, the application is on the on pause state. If you remove it from recent app, then the app goes through the on terminate phase. So when you launch the app, it's under the on create and then to the on start phase. So a number of phases or stages an application goes through. So that are defined under the app compat activity. And all these things have been discussed in a prior session where we discussed what is Android and how we have to start development in Android. We also created an application over there. So do have a look. I'll I'll add in the description the link to that video. And if you have not subscribed to our channel, do subscribe it. This was just for the Android section. We post videos for web development and machine learning, cybersecurity, so you'll get notified the next time we upload a video. So that's all about it. Now let's start. So we have the main activity class, and under the main activity class, the first thing is that we override the Oncreate function that is under the app compat activity. So we override the app compat activities Oncreate function, and first of all we call the same function from that app compat activity class, that's super.oncreate saved instance state. So saved instance state is if your app has primarily, if your app has been already opened, then the instance that has been saved from the last opening stage will be resumed if your app has been already earlier opened. So that's why we give the input as a saved instance state. Next, we tell what's the main activity and what's the UI for this screen. So we add it under set content view r.layout.activity main. So now we have to proceed from here. So first of all, we will call the button, or we'll bind the button that we have created under activity main.xml. So how can we do that? Then we have to first of all create a variable named calculate button, which will be a type of button. So we have added the type, and we'll find it by find view by id. We'll give the id to be r.id.calculate button. So now we have added the button. It says the button is not available, so we'll import the button class. Why does it say that find view by id? Find view by id should be working. Why does it say find view by id? So we have this id and we have this. Okay, we have called the button class too. So we have imported the button class, and we have added the button from the main activity main.xml file. Now we'll call calculate button dot set on click listener function. We'll call the set on click listener function on calculate button. So what it does is that on click listener, you can even read it what it means. So it will listen to the click of okay, we have written a wrong spelling. So set on-click listener. Now what on-click listener does is it listens to the click of the button that we have selected and tells what, and we have to define what we need to do when the button is clicked. So we'll define it under this, that whenever the button is clicked, what you need to do is that you need to call this function calculate tip, and we will create that function over here, private fun calculate tip, and we'll define how we can calculate tip. So this used to be the type of code or the progressive. This is how we used to progress for while designing or while linking the main activity.xml. I mean main activity.kt with activity main.xml. But now there has been, or there is a proper different way or an easier way to bind the activity main.xml with the main activity.kt. Will not be using find view by id function. Will rather use binding variable itself. So what I've done with main activity.kt2 is that I've already written the code for main activity.kt. I'll replace it with that, so it actually saves time, and I'll explain what every statement under that means. Control A, Control V. So this is all. So this is the main activity.kt file. So we have the main activity.app, main activity extending the app component activity, and for the first time we have created a variable named binding, which is of type activity main binding. So what it does is that it binds the both of the files, that main activity.kt and activity main.xml. So how does it bind? So it shows an error. So what we need to do is that we need to enable this feature of binding under the build Gradle of module level. So we have this build types. Below build types we can add build features, and under the build features we can enable view binding equals true. So we have added this in, and we'll sync it. Syncing in progress. So sync has been done. So you see that error is gone now. Activity main binding is now active. So with that, we have the function onCreate, and under onCreate, the first thing we do is that we initialize this binding variable. So at the first line, we have used the late init keyword. So what late init does is that it's a promise to the compiler that we will late initialize the binding variable late, but we'll surely initialize. It's just a promise. So that's what we do. First of all, we initialize the binding variable. Now we initialize with the activity main binding.inflate, and we give the layout inflator as the input. So what it does is that it inflates the layout XML and returns a binding object instance. So now we have the binding object, and now we have the binding done. That means the main activity.kt and activity main.xml both are linked. Now to set up the content view, earlier if you remember we used to have r.layout.activity main, but now we can use set content view as binding.root. Okay, so binding.root has been used as a set content view. Next, we don't need to even have the find view by id for the buttons that we had. What we can do is that we can call the same name that we used for button in main activity main.xml to refer it. So binding.calculate button. If you check the activity main.xml, this was the only id given there, and that's the reason we use id for every other UI that we use, element that we use. So the name was calculate_button, that is analogous to calculate button over here, and we can call directly the set on click listener and the function calculate tip. So that's done. We'll see what this statement is for soon, but let's first of all see what the calculate tip function does. So we have defined this function calculate tip. What it does is that it first of all takes the input from the user. So binding.cost of service edit text. So binding.cost of service edit text, we have that edit text as this text field that we had input. We have where we take the input. This is the cost of service edit text, and it calls the same cost of service edit text. the text property over it. It returns the text which has been kept given as the input. And then lastly, we call the toString function. Why do we call the toString function? Because the text property of process service text returns an editable. So we have to convert it to a string first of all, and we have converted that to string with the toString function. And once we have the string, we can call the double or null function to it. What it does is that if the text field is means in the form of a floating number, then it would be converted into the double. Otherwise, if the entered value is some alphabetic or null, then it will be converted to null. So that's why, but we have left no option to give alphabetic input by changing the input type to number decimal. That's why we use the input type as number decimal. So we have here we select the cost. Now we have got the cost in double. So also you can mention it here like double as the type of the variable. So what it says, change cost type to double. Okay, just because this could even be null for the inputs which are not which are, like the user doesn't gives an input and clicks the calculate button. So in that case it will be null. So if you want to use null, then you have to use question mark with the data type that you want to share. Similar was the thing with bundle. So bundle can also be null, therefore they use the question mark. So this is all about null safety. We have discussed null safety in the video which I mentioned earlier. Do visit that watch that video. I'll share the description. I'll share the link in the description. Next, if the cost is null or the cost is 0.0, display the tip. So if you have the cost is 0, then we don't have to calculate anything. All you need is to display the tip. So we have created another function, display tip, and we'll see how it works. And lastly, we return. But for the input which is not 0 or null, we have to calculate the tip percentage. So now we have the input of the user. We need to check, we need to see what is the radio button that's selected. So we'll find the radio button. So where we'll go with the binding, look for tip options, and under the tips options we will check, we'll see what is the checked radio button ID. So that means what is the ID of the checked radio button. So it will return the ID of the button. So we'll use the switch case to determine it. So when the selected or the checked radio button is equals to the ID of the 20%, then use the tip percentage as 0.20. If it is 18%, then use the tip percentage as 18.18. Else use the 0.15. So this is how we define the tip percentage. Now we have this value which stores the value of the tip percentage. We'll calculate the tip with the tip percentage. Now how do we do that? So we multiply the tip percentage with the cost. Now where was the cost? Cost is this double value that we have got from the input. So tip calculation has been done. Now we have to check whether the switch is on or off for roundup. So this is of the type Boolean. So you can always check and write the data type. It's a good practice. It actually becomes easier while debugging. So if your output doesn't comes to the type which you have mentioned, because if you don't mention, it takes it to the variable. It could be anything. But if you mention it, it's a good practice. So I mentioned it as Boolean, and it checks whether the switch is checked or not. If it is checked, then tip will be sealed to the tip value. That means it will be rounded off to the next integer. So how do we do that? So we use the math function of the Kotlin programming, and we enter the tip that we calculated, and it rounds it off. But if you don't want to round it off, then all you need to do is that display the tip. So again, the display tip function is called. Once it was called when the cost was 0. Now we'll see how the display tip function works. So this is the display tip function. So this is a display tip function. So display tip function takes the tip that we have to display, and it's obviously the double value. So first of all, we'll format it in the currency format, because when it's a double value, it's a 6 precision point number. So we have to convert the currency into just 2 decimal places. So that's the formatting we need to do. So we number format dot current dot get currency instance. That means you're asking the Kotlin programming to send us a currency instance, and we will then input the value that we have to format to the currency instance. So then we have called the format function and given the input as a tip that we shared every time, and we call the tip and display tip function. So now we have the formatted tip in the form of a currency. Then we just added binding.tip.result.binding.tip.result.text and string.ars.string.tip amount. Now it says that it's not defined. Is it that we haven't defined the string tip amount under the strings.xml? So we haven't defined the tip amount. So what we need to do is that we need to define the tip amount. I'll just copy it once and paste it. Instead of this name, we'll use this name, this one, and tip amount. And what it would be tip amount. We'll add the formatting even, since it will be the string that will be showing, since this string will be variable depending upon the value that we get for the tip. So we use the formatting here %s. It will be replaced with the value that is available, that gets that we get under the calculate tip function, and it will be visible under the same. Also under the strings.xml, also we have to replace the same thing under activity main.xml. So where is the activity main? So here, instead of tip amount $10, what we can do, that we can keep it, because tools text is visible only to the developer who is designing. When you run this application, this tools text which will not be visible. The Android text is visible, like wherever we use the text view, we have used the Android text. So this is visible, but the tools text is not visible. It's just for designing while the time you are developing the application. So this is all about the thing, and it displays the tip amount. Also, we have this handle key event. Now, what is this for? I said we have to ignore this, but let's see what this function does. So once the calculate button is done, we have defined another set on key listener. So when you call a text field, with every press of the text field, we can check what's happening. So that's what we have done here. So if the cost of service edit text is the text edit text that we have used here, we can cross check cost service edit text. This is the one. So on this, we have called the set on click listener, set on key listener. So every key that you press, or the soft key on the soft keyboard, it will listen the changes. And if you want anything to happen at that moment, you can define it under this. So what we do is that we pass the view, that this view, this Android, this screen on which this UI is done, and we pass the key code. Now what's the key code? Key code is the key that's being pressed by the user, and we define the handle key event function, where we again pass the same view and key code to handle the key event. So what's the handling we are doing here? So what's the handling which we are doing here is that if the user presses the enter button, then the soft keyboard should vanish, or it should go behind the screen. So unless and until the enter key is pressed, the keyboard should be available, should be visible. But as soon as the enter key is gone, so we'll just remove the soft keyboard. So how we'll do that? First of all, we for every key that the user press, we call the set on click listener. Then we pass the view, that's this one, this view that we are developing, and the key code, that's every key that the user is pressing. And we finally send them to the handle key event function. Now let's see the handle key event function. It takes the view as input and the key code, and it returns a boolean. So it returns a boolean that's true or false. Also, if we check that if the key code, that's the key that's being pressed by the user is an enter key. So if it is an enter key, you have to hide the keyboard. So how do you hide the keyboard? You get the system service, that's the input. We ask the system service to provide the permission to manage that thing. So we get the input method manager from the get system service. As the input method manager is just typecasting. So because get system service doesn't let us know what's the thing that we're what's the type of the thing we're asking for. So we at the last we tell that, so that the thing which we are asking is as an input method manager. Now on input method manager, we call the hide soft input from window that hides the keyboard whenever the key code / enter is pressed. So that's all about handle key event. It was just a small function to make the application more to make the user experience or more better. And lastly, we return the true or false thing, and that's also called under the same onCreate function. So that was all about main activity.kt file. Now let's run the application and check if everything is working perfectly or not. So for the running the application, we'll click this yellow triangle. It will open the emulator. So this one is the screen that we opened last time. So we will first of all remove this. The only thing that is left for now is okay. It can be possible that this app doesn't get installed because the package name and every other thing is same like tip time. So, but let's see what happens. So yeah, we have this UI now working. Only the problem is that we don't have the app icon. You see, the app icon is the default one that's provided by the Android. We need to add the app icon. We'll do it right now. So if we enter the service as 1,000 rupees, and if we select the service as okay, and if we click the calculate button, what happens? $150 is the tip amount that you have to pay. Also, the function that we added that to hide the key keyboard on pressing of enter button. So if this is pressed, hide the keyboard, so keyboard also gets hidden. So that's what that function handle key event was for. So all of this is working, and you can click the calculate button. So under the calculate button, you can also say that if you press the if you press the tick button or the enter button, it should calculate the percentage, or I should calculate the function, the tip at that moment itself, because when you click this, the last time the tip amount was $1,500, and unless until you click the calculate button, it doesn't calculate the tip. But let's change that, and as soon as this tick button is pressed or the enter is pressed, it must calculate the tip, but for now it's not. So how can we do that? Just a small line of code we need to add under the return true after the window hiding the window thing. So what it does, why is it coming over here? Okay, let's keep it. So now after hiding the soft keyboard, all we can do is that we can call the calculate tip function, and what it will do, that if the key code underscore is enter, it will calculate the tip, and that will work. But for that, again, we have to end this application and run it once again. So we have made the changes, and let's see it works. Okay, now we have this. So if you press the 100, if we enter the input as 100 and press the tick mark, see, we have the tip amount visible. So that's how we create an application under Android. So this was the application. We'll check if it works good with the dark mode too. Display, dark theme, and yeah, our application works fine with the dark mode too. So these all settings we have added under the themes.xml. If you remember, if you can't, then just go back and watch that thing. So this is all under the tip time thing. Next, let's add the app icon. So for now, the app icon looks like this. We need to change the app icon. So the app icon thing has been adaptive since the material design was adapted. So Android 8.0 and above have this adaptive icon theming. So how do we add this adaptive icon theming? So let's just see what are the folders that contains the app icon. So under the res, these Java generated and res generated are the folders that are created now when we ran the application. So that's just for the test purpose. You don't need to worry. We'll check the normal ones. So under the res folder, if we open the MIP map, we have these IC launchers. So these are the launcher. The preview must be visible. See, so these are the launcher icons that was visible right now. We have to change them. And IC launcher round one looks like this. So this is the launcher icon, and we have to manipulate this icon to the one we want. Also under the MIP map, if you check under the project view, there are a number of MIP maps available. I'll show you. Project view, app, src, main, res, and you see a number of MIP maps available. So what are these MIP maps? So every phone has a different pixel density. You have to define the app icon for every pixel, for every range of pixels. So if the Android device belongs to the high DPI, SDPI or MDPI or extra high DPI, so you have to enter the same launcher icon for every other Android device. So that's why all these different MIP map. So all we can do is that for now, we'll check the any DPI version 26. Version 26 actually means the 26th API version. That was Android 8.0. I said this thing was adapted under that same thing. So this is the file that we have to change. So how do we add the app icon? So we first of all, every app icon has two different things. One is the foreground and other one is the background. So here in this app icon, the foreground thing is this Android icon, and at the background is this green chart or whatever you call it. So this is the foreground and background. In our application, we also have a green text. If I can show you the app icon, but now let's change it, and then we will see what are the foreground and background. So if you want to check what are the foreground and background separately, go to the drawable folder, and now here you can see the IC launcher background. So background is this green one, it will be visible. So this is here, and under the drawable version 24, you have the foreground, that's Android icon that we will be watching. So we have to replace these two to get the app icon. So this is the Android launcher foreground.xml file. To learn how to create app icons, it will be it could be a topic of some other day. So let's move forward and add the XML files, and that will change this app icon to the one we wanted. So how we can do is that we will move to the resource manager, click on the plus button, and instead of the vector asset, we'll click the image asset. And under the image asset, we first of all will select the foreground layer. So what could be the foreground layer? So I have already written the foreground layer XML file, and that's also kept on the desktop. So I'll choose that one. I'll choose the desktop. Close snap, open home, select desktop, and the desktop we have this IC launcher foreground. So we select this IC launcher foreground.xml file, click on OK. So you see this is the foreground thing that we had. So now our foreground is visible, and it's it looks pretty much fine. All we need to do is to replace the background. So we'll select the background layer, and we'll again select the background XML file. So this is the IC launcher background. So now we have selected the background and the foreground. Okay, it selects it from the Android Studio, so I have to change it and select it from the desktop view. So home, desktop, IC launcher background. So now we have the background, that's this green teal kind of color, and our application icon is ready. So this is how we add the app icon. Next we have to click on next. You see what it says, that every other maps icon will be replaced with the one that we created. This is the one. So some existing files will be overwritten by this operation. That's what we want, because we want for every other screen and the app icon should be work properly. So we'll click on finish and the app icon will be updated. Let's see if the app icon is working fine or not. But before that, I'll close all the open files. We'll check the project view, and under the drawable folder now we have the IC launcher background, which will look like, okay, it's a foreground. So we have the foreground, we have the background, we have the foreground and the background thing, but why is this thing background should be under the background. Okay, now we will run this application and check whether it works or not. So we have opened the emulator. Currently the app icon is the Android one, but let's see when the application gets built what is the app icon. Oh, it still shows the background has been updated, but the foreground is not updated. So we'll change it. So the drawable folder, in the drawable folder, for different maps, do we have that replaced? Yeah, okay. So the background is replaced, but the foreground is not replaced. So we'll replace the foreground. We'll cut it. First of all, we'll remove this foreground from here. This foreground is the Android app icon that's visible, so we won't be using it. So we'll remove this, delete. Okay, delete alternative resource file. Yes, we don't need it. Delete anyway. So we have removed the IC background. Oh shit, I removed the IC launcher foreground too. Okay, fine. I'll add the foreground one. So in the same manner, we'll click on the resource manager, click on image asset, and select the foreground layer and the background layer. Click on next, click on finish. So I think that's done. Now we have the foreground as this one and background as, we don't need this background, right? We have already defined what the background will be. So we'll remove this background file. So we have the foreground and we have the background too. Now let's build the app once again and check if the app icon has been updated or not. Every other launcher icon should also look in the same manner. Yeah, the launcher icons, the maps look the same, but let's see the app in the real view. So is it up? Okay, this is installed, and you see the app icon is now updated. We have the background and the foreground working. App icon is done. Dark mode is also working, and this clicking on the enter button. Clicking on the enter button also gives us the tip amount. So this is the application that we were building, and I hope you'd like the development process. You understand what I said. If you have any queries, you can ask in the comments, and I'll link all the, I'll write all those links which are important under the description section. And this is for the day. And soon we'll be coming up with another session. It could be a live one or a recorded one for a better app or a different app, and there we'll learn some different things. So this is the application. Until then, subscribe to our channel. We'll bring some more contents on different topics. So this is it. Bye bye.